Hi there, welcome. My name is Nicole with morningchores.com. Today's video is a daily, weekly garden routine video. I'm going to walk you through what I do on a daily, weekly basis to kind of stay on task with my garden through the planting, growing, and harvesting season. If you're new here, we would love for you to hit that subscribe button. We have a whole list of videos on gardening, homesteading, canning, you name it, it's there. We'd love for you to check those out. If you are a seasoned viewer, welcome back. We're so grateful for your support, and I'm really excited about this video because I feel like this is one of those things that everyone's got different ideas and opinions on, and gardening can be overwhelming, especially if you start really big and you've planted all these things and now you're trying to figure out, how do I stay on track and stay on top of everything without feeling overwhelmed. So I'm going to share a few things that I've learned along the way, and I'm still learning. My practices are still evolving, so it's definitely a lifelong journey in the world of gardening, but I'm hoping that today I can give you some inspiration and encouragement. First tip of the day is what I call the morning walkthrough. I try to do this almost every day. Yes, there are mornings that I do not get this done, but I really try hard to do it at least 4 to 5 times a week. And basically what this is in the early morning, usually when I'm drinking my coffee, either I'm the only person up in the family, sometimes my son is up and he'll be out with me. But what I like to do is I like to take this time before the day really gets going, and I like to walk through my gardens. The whole goal with this is to just observe and take stock. I'm not doing any kind of work. I may see something that needs done, but I really try to hold back and not do any of the work, because it's very easy to get distracted if you see something that needs done and start working on it, and then you forget to walk through the rest of your gardens. But what I like to do is I like to just take this time and just kind of slowly meander through the gardens and just take note of what needs done. Are there any pests that I need to take care of? What truly needs more weeding than other areas? Later in the season, I may see, oh, the tomatoes need harvested. I just kind of take note of all these different things. Maybe something needs staked or some extra trellising. I just kind of take this time to just observe and look. I got this idea from my grandfather. My grandfather used to be a plant manager for a large automobile manufacturing company here in the United States. And towards the end of his career, he's retired now, but towards the end of his career, what he would do is he would get transferred from one factory to another, and his whole job was to kind of get the factory back on track in regards to efficiency. And one of the first things he would do is he would take a clipboard with paper and a pen, and he would just walk the floors of the factory talking to the actual workers, the actual men and women that were making the products. And he would ask them, what's going on? What's good here? What's bad here? What needs improvement? He got the information directly from the source. So I've taken this concept and I've applied it to my own property, my gardens, my home. I actually apply this to everything, even my animals. As I'm kind of walking through the gardens, I will take note of the animals. How are the chickens doing? Is their coop okay? Are there holes in the fence? And I even do this with my home. I will walk around the home and say, oh, those windows need washed, or that siding needs washed, or this needs repaired. It's just a really good way to kind of stay on top of things before they get out of hand. I know that there's many different methods to approach this, but for me, if I just don't walk through the gardens at all and I end up going down there, let's say a week, a month, 2 months later, everything's a mess. The weeding is out of control. There's so many things that need done, and I just get overwhelmed. So I find this morning walkthrough, not only is it a great way to start the day, it's a very relaxing, kind of easy way to start the day, but it's a great way to kind of check in with everything and see what exactly needs done, what doesn't need done, what needs more attention than other areas. It's just a really just beautiful, relaxing way to start the day, while also accomplishing the task of staying on top of your garden. Tip number 2 is weeding, and I feel like weeding needs its own category. And weeding is one of those things that can get out of control very quickly. Now, keep in mind, I do not spray any chemicals on my garden. I don't do any kind of weed control in form of chemicals. So with that in mind, I have to accept the fact that I'm going to have weeds in my garden. My garden is never going to look like this perfect magazine garden. I think it's important to stay on top of the weeds, and I should not let that be an excuse to not weed. But I have had to accept the fact that my garden is not going to be picture perfect, and that is okay. I just don't feel comfortable using chemicals like Roundup and 7 and some of those others just because of some of the studies come out on how they affect our health. And that's a decision you're going to have to make for yourself. So when it comes to weeding, weeding is not one of my favorite chores, but I've learned to love weeding. And this is how I have changed my thought process and my approach to weeding so that I do love it. The first thing is I weed a little bit every day. So instead of saving all the weeding for one day, like let's say Thursday is my weeding day, I just find the weeding gets out of hand too quickly, and then I have to spend hours weeding. And that to me is just too overwhelming, and it makes weeding very daunting. So what I do is I try to weed every single day, even if it's just for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is better than no minutes. So usually I tackle my garden chores in the late morning, maybe late afternoon to early evening. I don't work in the heat of the day unless I have to. I try to save my garden chores for the morning or the afternoon, early evening. So usually after I've done my morning garden routine, I go back inside, make breakfast for the rest of the family, clean up a little bit, throw some laundry in the washing machine, and then as long as we don't have to go anywhere, I will head outside with the kids. The kids will play. Sometimes they help me, but this is when I tackle my garden chores. So this would be planting, harvesting, staking, trellising, and weeding. So this is when I will tackle that weeding, and I always try to get it out of the way firsthand. So if I do have other garden chores, I always weed first because I'll find any excuse not to weed. So I always take care of the weeding first, and I tell myself if I can just weed for 5 minutes, that's good. And a lot of times I end up weeding longer. I've caught myself weeding for 20 minutes. And it's because I've just learned to enjoy it. I try to enjoy the sounds of nature as I'm weeding. I also use it as my prayer time or my thinking time. So sometimes if I have a lot to pray about or think about, I usually tend to weed a little bit longer. So that's kind of what I do to tackle the weeding is I try to do a little bit each day. I also try to tackle the areas that need it the most. So when I do my morning walk through, I kind of pay attention to what areas need more weeding than others, and I'll tackle those first. And there are times where I will weed in the morning, and then later in the evening when we're back outside, I might just go ahead and weed another area just because I'm out there and I don't really have anything else to do. So I find that weeding a little bit each day is better for me than saving all the weeding for one day. Tip number 3 is in regards to my extra jobs, and I kind of mentioned this already, but when I do my morning walkthrough, I pay attention to what extra things need done. Do I have any planting left to do? We're kind of phasing out of the planting season of gardening, and now we're kind of in the sit and wait until everything starts flowering and blooming and growing. But I pay attention to what else needs done. Do I need to stake the tomato plants? How about prune them? Do I need to do pest control? You know, all of these things I pay attention to, and I add that to my morning or my afternoon, early evening gardening chore list. Now, I don't have to do these things every day, and it's also ebbs and flows. So usually I have garden chores aside from weeding maybe 1 to 3 times a week. And again, it just depends. Like right now, I don't have a lot to do. My main thing is pest control. So for example, I noticed last week when I was doing my morning walkthrough that I noticed my basil was getting eaten and my peppers, and it was the slugs. So I was able to get on top of it right away and research what to do for slugs, which I found out that coffee grounds works really well if you sprinkle them around, because I haven't had any slug issues since doing that. But see, I was able to catch it ahead of time or right when the problem started. If I would have waited a week, all of my basil would have been eaten up and I would never have figured out what ate it. So the morning routine is really good. But again, back to my actual garden chores outside of weeding, they usually occur 1 to 3 times a week. It ebbs and flows. For example, when we get into the harvesting season, I'm out here every day picking produce. That's a chore I have to do almost every day, whereas right now, the only thing I'm really harvesting right now is some basil and some asparagus, and I only have to check every maybe 2 to 3 days. So my garden chore list is very low right now. So again, I just tackle these things whenever they're needed. It's anywhere from 1 to 3 times a week, but when we get into harvesting, it'll be almost every day. And this is something that I can keep tabs on during that morning walkthrough. And it really does help just kind of stay on top of things. My last tip of the day is slow and steady. So what do I mean by this? And again, I've kind of touched on this, but I think it's important. At least I think most of us live very busy lives. You know, whether you're in the season of raising children or pursuing your career, or maybe you're retired and have lots of time on your hands, but regardless of which, we all have things going on in our lives. And for me, I find what works best for my family and my routine is to work at the garden slow and steady. Just chisel away at it little bits at a time, a little bit every day, rather than ignoring the garden all week long and saving it all for Saturday or all for Sunday. For me, that just does not work, because then the work is so overwhelming that I just get overwhelmed to the point where I don't really know where to begin, and I just throw my hands up. So for me, that does not work. If that works for you, great though, and you should definitely do what works for you. For me, I find that just working a little bit at the garden every single day really adds up, and I find it's easier for me to stay on top of the work involved, and I'm able to enjoy the whole process of the garden a little bit more at a little bit slower of a pace, which for me is more enjoyable, because then also too I get to see the process more because I'm involved in the garden every single day. So I'm seeing those little changes, and it is really enjoyable to kind of take the slower approach, because I feel like if I didn't, I would miss out on a lot of those little miracles that happen in your garden. So just to recap on my top 4 tips for my daily, weekly garden routine is: number 1, do the morning walkthrough. If you're not a morning person, you can always do it in the evening or whatever suits your schedule. I just like to do it in the morning because I think it's a really peaceful way to start the day. Number 2, weeding. Weed a little bit every day, or do whatever you have to do to make weeding enjoyable. You can listen to music, you can weed with a friend. If you like to watch YouTube videos, you could put on a YouTube video and say, I'm gonna weed as long as this video. Whatever you gotta do to weed just a little bit each day, rather than saving all the weeding for one day. Tip number 3, make a list of weekly chores to do in the garden, and this should come from your morning or evening walkthrough. So figuring out what needs done that week in the garden: planting, staking, trellising, weeding, pest control, harvest. Make that list and plan out your week accordingly. And the last tip is slow and steady. Work at your garden just a little bit each day. Work it into your routine so it's an enjoyable process. Do it as a family, whatever you have to do, but I will say that I think when you spend time in your garden almost every single day, it really pays off leaps and bounds in the long run. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you found it helpful, encouraging, and inspiring. I would love to hear in the comments, what do you guys do in your daily, weekly garden routine? I'm sure your routine changes as the season progresses, but it is fun to learn from each other, so I would love to hear in the comments section below. You can also head over to morningchores.com. There's all kinds of articles over there on gardening, everything from pest control to how to grow onions and much more. Hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you on the next video.